It's 1:10 now, so we can go ahead and kick things off. I think most people will have arrived. So today we're going to be going over Claude agent teams. So as we were talking about just a minute ago, this is starting to move into intermediate skill level territory in that we will be interacting with, a shell or a terminal, which some of you might not have done before, but it is relatively easy. We are going to be providing the commands that you'll need to use that you can essentially copy and paste into these terminals and install Claude code that way, and then set up your teams and then also terminal multiplexer, otherwise known as TMUX, which is the ability to view multiple of these agents at the same time within one terminal. So it's really not as complex as it might sound. And again, we have guides here that are all linked within the slides that you'll be able to refer back to as needed in case you miss something or get lost, or we move on a little bit too quickly. This presentation itself is going to go pretty quickly, much quicker than the one we did about a week ago, because I need to go watch my kids. So I'm going to abbreviate it just a little bit. We will walk through the setup and the actual prompts and everything to do the demo, but we won't be doing a full demo in that we won't be developing a full app or anything. I can show you real quick some of the applications that I created, but we aren't going to sit here and wait for Claude to actually develop and code everything and then go back to it. So with that being said, hopefully all of you have access the slides. Luis has posted them to chat. They're also on the screen. If you're on your phone, scan the QR code or type in the tiny URL to open up the slides. And we will go ahead and continue. All right, so a little about myself and then about the AI Collective. So I'm a co-lead of the Hampton Roads chapter here in Virginia Beach. Been in tech for about 25 years, with about 12 years in AI, and I've worked for, some of the largest tech companies out there. I've worked for NASA, the military, and for 5 startups. And I wrote, a few books, including one, AI for Business, and I do a lot of AI work now. And the AI Collective is a nonprofit grassroots community, the largest nonprofit AI community in the world with over 220,000 members. And we really, promote AI positivity and try and help people collaboratively steer towards a better future, utilizing AI. And what we're going to go over today includes a number of things around agent teams. But first, we are going to recap a little bit what we went over on the talk on the 9th, which is just a structured overview of what Claude Code is and what it does. Then we're going to talk about agent teams and how that adds to that stack, a little bit deeper about what agent teams does. Then we're going to dive into the setup of agent teams. We're going to swap over to the setup guide and go through the actual setup. So if you've never worked with PowerShell before, we're going to open up a PowerShell window. We're going to type some commands in there to install Claude Code. And then we're going to go over to an Ubuntu terminal, which Ubuntu is a type of Linux. And we're going to be actually running Claude Code within the Ubuntu terminal. And if you are on a Mac device or you are already on a Linux device, it's actually going to be easier for you. I am on a Windows device right now, so it's a little trickier and more finicky for setting up Linux and using Claude Code because it really likes being natively in Linux. But regardless, it still works. So we're going to use it. And after that, we're just going to go over some best practices for Claude Code teams. And then we're going to go over the homework guide real quick, which is just a take home for you guys to use and stuff to think about to build out your own Claude agent team sessions. And then we're going to provide some links to some resources, and then we'll open it back up to Q&A. I am currently not monitoring chat, so Luis is, one of our team leads, and he is monitoring chat right now, so he should be able to answer many of the questions you have in text format. And then again, I will answer the Q&A at the end of the session. All right, so framing all of this, the reason why Claude Agent Teams is here is because a single agent is not enough. And it's not just that you're limited to a single agent or a single, GUI in the case of Claude Desktop. It is that many people who utilize these types of tools for development, for research, for a variety of different use cases, want to do multiple things at a time. And the web interface is somewhat limited, especially in terms of what it can do for coding. And so you have Claude Desktop, which is great for file access and for coding. And sometimes you can only be doing one thing at Claude Desktop, right? Because you can only have one active session. And that means that if you want to continue to do other coding or work on a different part of your project, then you need an additional terminal open. So you can either have two devices, or you can just open up a terminal session, as we're going to be doing. And in that terminal session, you can run Claude code. And then within Claude code, you can specify agent teams. And we will dive into the agent teams here now. So the agent teams allow you not just to create and specify multiple agents with very specific roles, but you can also give them permissions, access, and tools based on those specific roles. And so the team that we're going to be setting up later, we're actually going to provide you prompts for 3 different teams, but the team that we're going to go over in the actual demo is going to be the setup of a developer team. And that team is going to include a front-end developer, a back-end developer, and a QA. So QA is quality assurance for those who aren't in the field. But the front-end developer will be working on the front end of the application, the back-end developer will work on the back end, and the QA will be testing their work. And so they each have individual prompts and individual roles and permissions that are granted to them. And so you, as the narrator of this or the orchestrator, are defining what all of these roles and actions and permissions should be. And that can be as flexible as you'd like it to be. You'll see later in the prompts that it is very easy to create a role and scope for these agents, to tell them what to do, and to get them to work together. And so where does the agent teams offering fit within the agentic stack? These first 5 are what we talked about in our last talk. We have Claude code. Really should be sitting at the base because everything else is built on top of it, but here it's at the top of the, I guess it's not a pyramid, it's more of a ziggurat. But Claude code is kind of the core, the kernel that does the terminal native coding. And then we have Cowork, which allows for file access on your local machine. And then we have connectors, which allows you to connect in your Gmail and calendar like we used in the previous presentation, where we created our daily reports, which pulled information from Gmail and calendar to summarize it on a daily basis so we know what we need to do that day. And there's many other connectors. And then on top of that, we can add tasks, and tasks allows for recurring and scheduled tasks that run natively on your local machine through Claude Desktop. Now, there's actually a web-based version of this that came out 2 or 3 days ago called Routines, which is essentially tasks, but it runs in the web. It doesn't have the exact same feature set, but for the majority of tasks you do, they can be set in the browser as opposed to on your local machine, which means that you don't need to keep your local machine on to run these, which is very useful if you want to, do code organization and, quality control and things like that on the back end without having to use your system resources. And then we have the dispatch tool, which allows us to sync our mobile device with our Claude Desktop and use it from anywhere. And now we're talking about adding in agent teams, and that allows us additional parallel use, right? You can have your desktop open working on a specific project. You can have 1 or more terminal sessions open, each with their own set of teams and agents. and direct them all to be working on different projects or different aspects of the same project. All right, so we covered most of this. Two of the most important parts, though, are with agent teams, you can communicate with the agents individually rather than what you might be used to in a prompt. If you're talking to, Claude on the web or Claude desktop, right, you're only talking to essentially the orchestrator, right, and not any of the sub agents. Whereas with agent teams, you can talk to the agents individually. So we talked about a front end, a back end, and a QA agent. In agent teams, you're able to speak with each of those individually, and you're able to monitor them individually. You can see what they're doing, where they're at in their task list, if they've gotten stuck anywhere, and then speak to them on an individual basis to get them going again. All right, so we are moving towards the demo now. So these are all prerequisites for working on the demo. So the first one is Claude Code. We are actually going to be going through the installation of Claude Code and setting up the agent teams flag as well. So, you don't need to have all of this prepped before we go into the setup guide, but these are things that you will need. We're going to be using the Opus model. So the Opus model is what's needed. It doesn't need to be 4.7, but it is needed to be Opus rather than Sonnet or Haiku to actually utilize agent teams. And you do need a Pro or Max subscription. I think we talked about that at the beginning of the slide. Someone asked the question of whether or not that's needed, and it absolutely is. You need at least a Pro account or a Max account to work on this. So if you don't have one, feel free to continue to learn. There is still some of this that you can do. You should be able to use an API as well and connect that once you install Claude Code and you go to authorize. I personally don't use it that way, but I'm pretty sure the option still is there. All right, so here are the slides. So you can either type in this URL. Luis is probably going to post it into chat, which I can't see at the moment. Or you can scan the QR code if you're on, a mobile device or you need the QR code. And that will bring you to, where's the document setup guide? All right. Should bring you to a document that looks like this. So this setup guide is going to go over everything we need to do to set up agent teams, including a prerequisite for Windows users. So I am on a Windows machine right now. I do have Linux servers and Mac devices, but none of them have webcams. So I am presenting this on a Windows device. So I'll be showing you the Windows setup here. And so as we're going to go over, the first part of this is bringing up PowerShell. And so to bring up PowerShell to install Linux, you need to hit the Windows button and type in PowerShell, and then right-click to run as administrator to bring up the PowerShell. And I will swap over to the PowerShell so you guys can see what it looks like here. All right. So this is what PowerShell looks like. It's a very simple screen. And hopefully you guys have the setup doc up. But the first command it talks about doing is WSL, which stands for Windows Subsystem for Linux. And it's having you check to see if you actually have Linux installed in WSL. WSL is just a feature of Windows that allows you to run the Linux operating system within the Windows environment. And if you have Linux installed, any of the Linux versions will show up in this list. If you don't, then it will say something like, no return, or it just won't show anything here. In which case, you will need to run a different command. So we want to be installing Ubuntu 24.04, which is one of the long-term support versions, which means that it is still getting patches. And so it's just a good platform to use for working on a project like this. And so the next step to actually install that would be typing in 2404. All right. So this is the command. I already have Ubuntu installed, so I'm not going to run this command. But for anyone that does not have Ubuntu installed and is on a Windows machine and needs to install it, this is the actual command to run it. And then we need 2 more commands. So the next one is to install Node.js. And actually, I should probably be setting that up. I'm going to open an Ubuntu shell now. So for Windows users that haven't done that before, you again click on the Windows button, and then you type Ubuntu into your search bar, and then right-click it and run Ubuntu as administrator, and it will bring up a shell for Ubuntu. So before we start working in Ubuntu, we need to install Node.js, which is a requirement for installing Claude code. And the command is listed in the document. It is a curl command. This is the actual curl command in the shell. All right, you guys are saying that you don't see Ubuntu in the list. There should be a command to list it. Let me check. Let's see. I think it's WSL list. Yeah. Ubuntu-2404. Yeah, you might have to enable virtualization, as Dennis is saying, or enable WSL specifically. Let me see if I can find real quick a write-up to paste in chat for how to do that. All right, it looks like you have to type in into the same PowerShell terminal the command WSL -- install. So that should install WSL for you, and then you should be able to type in the next WSL install command for Ubuntu. So WSL 1 versus 2. So WSL version 2 is generally better for developers. So Mac users generally don't have to install Ubuntu. Mac runs on a Unix variant, basically. And so the commands for setting this up on Mac are going to be a little bit different. I believe they're in the setup guide, though, in step 2. You can test skip ahead and test the Mac install for Tmux and then Claude. So the Mac install command is brew install Tmux. Yeah, Nancy, it shouldn't take that long to install Ubuntu. On the machine that I was testing here, it took about 30 seconds. So Jace, to run Ubuntu after it's installed, you're going to click the Windows, type in Ubuntu, and then right-click Run as Administrator to open up an Ubuntu shell. Wow, Christine, that is interesting. Certainly did not take that long when I was testing it. But it could be either due to your internet connection or some limitation on your machine, which we can't really diagnose as part of this because it's probably unique to your specific machine. But again, the recording for this will be hosted on many of our channels. So if you fall behind for any reason, feel free to check back with the guide and or the recording, and you'll be able to catch up and pick up where you left off. Yeah, Brett. Ubuntu is definitely a Linux distribution, and yes, macOS is a derivative of Unix. Absolutely. So, Nancy, that means that Linux is still setting itself up. Afterwards, you'll need to create, essentially a username and password, and then it should be ready to go. Thomas, the previous session. Oh, all right, Luis got it for you. Toby, I'm not sure what you are asking. All right, so where were we at? All right. So the next command we have to run is installing Claude code. There are a few different commands to do that. So if you are in Mac or some versions of Linux, you can use a curl command, and I will share the Ubuntu session with that command. Let me go ahead and swap screens. All right, you guys should be able to see the Ubuntu session. You know it's Ubuntu because of the little Ubuntu symbol in the top left. But this is the specific command to, or at least one of the specific ways that you can install software in Linux, and in most versions of Mac OS, you should be able to use curl commands. And this is to install the package from Claude.ai, which is the Claude code package. And I already have it installed, so I don't think this will work, but we can go ahead and test it. All right. So yep, it was already installed, but it did say installation complete. If you want to install it via PowerShell, I'm going to put the command in here so you can see. This is the actual PowerShell command if you want to install it via PowerShell. And then we also have the option to install it via Windows command line with a different command. So that is the command to do it from command line. I know some of the installation commands are in here, but I need to paste those additional two in the setup guide for the command line and for PowerShell. All right. So after it's installed, then we need to actually run Claude. So this is asking you if you want to trust the home folder, which is kind of like the root folder in Linux. And so you hit yes. I've already authenticated to this. So if you guys have not authenticated yet to Claude Code, this is the area where you would authenticate to it. All right, I'm going to jump back to chat to see if you guys are asking questions about this. All right. So Nancy asked if you need to reinstall Claude through Ubuntu. So you shouldn't need to if you already have it installed on Linux or on your Windows machine. You should be able to still pull up the executable via the Ubuntu shell. If it's not letting you, then go ahead and try and reinstall it. Divine asked, is there a difference between using Claude code in an IDE like VS Code? So there is. You can't use Claude agent teams via an IDE. You need to specifically use one of the shell interfaces, and it will allow you to do the granular per agent setup. Whereas with an IDE, using VS Code or one of the forks like Cursor, then you don't have the same granularity or granular control of the types of agents that you're using and launching. So it is different. You can use them simultaneously if you want to, but the experience is going to be different. So I don't know how to pronounce your name, but you asked, are the commands available in the document to copy and run? And the answer is yes, there's a great deal of commands and prompts in the document to run. Okay, and that looks like all of the questions that I've seen. So you're giving Claude Code access to the specific folder that it outlined, which I think was just the home slash, in my case, it's THEGA folder. So you're giving access to all folders and files within that file structure, yes. But you can be more granular with the file access if you want. All right, so let's jump back into the setup document again. So those were all of the commands for setting it up. I'm going to add the additional options for Mac users and for installing via command line if people need them. The next part is setting up agent teams. So I am going to share the setup guide again. It's not sharing. All right, let's try again. There we go. All right. Okay, looks like I got an error. Let me try and fix this error real quick. Yeah, Nancy, thanks for linking that. All right, so you guys should be able to see the setup guide again. So the next step is to enable agent teams. You have a specific agent teams folder or Claude folder with a settings file in it. And within that settings file, there is a field for Claude Code experimental agent teams. If it doesn't have it, you can copy and paste this into the file. I will show you quickly what that file looks like. because it's also where you set up things like MCPs. All right. Let me share the screen real quick. All right, and show cursor. All right, you guys should see the cursor screen within the env section of settings.json. You have the ability to input the field Claude Code experimental agent teams, and it needs to be set to 1 for true, which will enable it. If it's set to 0 or it's not in there, it will not work. So this must be done, and then you need to save the file, and then we will go back into the Ubuntu session to continue. So make sure this part is set up. All right. The code that you actually need is in the setup guide. This is the environmental setting for the settings.json. And then this is the specific field you need to add, and make sure that it's set to 1 again. That will unlock it, and you can verify that it works by going into a new Claude Code session, which hopefully you left up your Ubuntu Claude Code session a minute ago. And then you can say, please create a team. Or you can go ahead and skip ahead to step 3 and copy the actual team prompt and bring it over to Claude Code, which I will share the Claude Code screen here. So you guys should be able to see. And you right click to paste into these terminals. And so I just pasted in that entire prompt, which is directly from the setup guide. So it is step 3 of the setup guide, if you guys are wondering where it is. So it looks like it gave me an error because I already have a team named Full Stack, and this is asking to create another team named Full Stack. That is the same config because I set it up earlier, but you should not be getting that error. We can also fix that just by changing the name here and naming the team something else. We swap back over to chat, see if you guys have more questions. Luis just posted another setup guide again, which is great. Yeah, you guys can still hear me, right? All right, cool. That's great. All right, so hopefully if you pasted this into Ubuntu, you are getting a success message that said that these 3 agents have been created and the team has been created. Now, there is another step, and that step will actually, you have options if you want to tear down the team that you just created and create it using the terminal multiplexer. I will show you real quick as I have it up what Teams with the terminal multiplexer looks like, which is a different window. All right. So this window has the terminal multiplexer active, which is step 2 of the setup guide. So we're just testing if the team works, but when it does work and you've set it up using the terminal multiplexer, it will look different than having the single agent. And so it will show you the QA agent down here. It will show you the backend agent and the front end agent. And so you'll be able to see all of them. So let's go back to the setup guide. So this is step 2, as I was just saying, which is setting up the terminal multiplexer, shortened to tmux, but the commands will vary depending on the shell you are using. If you were using Mac, the command to set up the multiplexer, if you want to, would be brew install tmux. And the command to set it up with Ubuntu or Debian or most other flavors of Linux would be sudo apt install tmux. And then that just installs the ability to use it. Then you would have to set up a new tmux session and then type in Claude to launch Claude in that particular tmux session. And so once you do that, it will go to a prompt where you can paste in the prompt from step 3, which what we were talking about today is the full stack build. We did add 2 other prompts for the types of teams that you might want to create. This first template for the full stack build creates the front-end developer, the back-end developer, and the QA, and then provides rules that we're going to talk about. These rules are important because without these rules, the agents will fight each other over some specific files. And so if they're working in parallel and they're overwriting one another's work, you can have issues. And so specifying rules for behavior for the agents prior to enabling them will help a great deal. And then real quick about the other 2 templates that we're setting up or that we offer in the setup guide. We have the research and implementation team. So you have a researcher, an implementer, and a reviewer following a similar process, again, with rules. And then we have a content pipeline. If you like making social media content, you can have a context gatherer that will do research and gather context. You can have a writer that will write the actual, scripts and or posts. And then you have an editor that will quality check all of that work before it gets sent to whatever social media account you have linked. And again, rules. So all of these have rules. You can, again, create any team template you want utilizing, Claude or, any other LLM. So it can be Claude or GPT or Gemini. They will all be able to spit out templates for Claude agent teams that look like this. And then you can just copy and paste them into the tmux session, and it will create the team for you. So it is very flexible. These 3 are just, some of the most common use cases that you could be using. And hopefully you guys have a team set up. And if so, then you need to know and create something using that team, right? And so to that end, we put in a prompt, one prompt for each of the different agents to create a simple URL shortener like we used for the slide presentation. All of those slide links, right? We use tinyURL, but to create a web app that is similar to tinyURL, we have a number of prompts that would allow you to do it. So instead of having one generic prompt like you would send to Claude in your browser or GPT or Gemini, right? You break it down on a per agent basis so that each agent knows specifically what it's supposed to be doing and the work it's going to deliver and any constraints that you want to give it, things that it shouldn't be doing. And so this is the prompt for the front end agent. And so you would copy and paste this from the front end agent into your Ubuntu session, specifically into the front end dev prompt bar. Now, we didn't go over it before, but there are two ways to navigate through the Ubuntu tmux session. The most common way, if you are a Mac user or a native Linux user, is to press Shift down, and that will navigate through the front end to the back end to the QA agent so that you can paste this into the appropriate terminal. If you are using WSL, if you're using Windows and Linux through WSL, then that command is actually bugged right now. And I tried a dozen different workarounds and none of them worked. So the only way to actually get it to swap the agents is to press enter, down, down, enter, and it will give you a list of the agents that you have set up. And then you can go down and select the agent that you want to use. And I'll show that quickly here. All right, hopefully you can see that. So I have team full stack with, I created an extra copy of the agents when we were setting this up a minute ago, but you can cycle through these and then press enter, and then you are in the QA reviewer. There we go. All right, so then we just swap to the QA terminal. So you will need to cycle through it that way. It is enter, down, down, enter to bring up that list of agents. Everyone else using it natively on Linux or Mac OS should be able to just use Shift down to cycle through the agents, which makes it a lot easier. But hopefully that issue will be fixed soon. Right, so back into the setup guide, the prompts that we'll use or you guys will be using, since we're approaching time here, we're not going to be able to close out pasting in all of these. So the prompts here, again, you'll add the front end dev to the front end dev prompt bar, then cycle to the back end dev and copy and paste the back end dev prompt into the back end agent. And then you will copy and paste the QA agent over into the QA bar. So make sure you're cycling between the agents before you paste in the prompt, or it will go to the wrong agent and it will, it won't give you an error message, but it will tell you that you're talking to the wrong person or the wrong agent, right? It's not an actual person yet. But that being said, that is the end of the setup guide. So hopefully you guys were able to follow along and make it to this part. If not, we will have you guys will have access to the slides, to the recording, to the setup guide. And we're going to go back to the slide deck now so that we can close out the rest of this. before time runs out. So again, these are the QR codes and the link to the setup guide. This is just a quick overview of how to set this up. You saw it can vary quite a bit depending on the operating system you're using and the specific, version, and whether or not you've enabled virtualization or WSL. If you're on Windows, there might be a few other commands that you might need to enable for a Mac, depending on what Mac OS version you're using, if you're using one of the older ones. But we can't obviously troubleshoot all of those live right now. So if you are having technical issues with setting this up, I would advise having, Claude Desktop or, a Claude browser session open at the same time, and then just copy and paste any errors that you have into that session and ask Claude how to troubleshoot it, right? Claude will give you in natural language, usually the exact commands that you need to copy and paste to fix whatever the error is and get back on track. So these are the rules that we talked about in some of the constraints and everything that we gave the agents, and in the initial prompt, that we don't allow agents to fight over files, that they need to plan before they execute, and that they need explicit handoff messages. So without that, there can be a lot of chaos and confusion and file overwrites and errors. So these are very important rules to include with any team that you set up and any agent that you build. So just make sure to include those. We have them in all of the copy and paste prompts that you'll have access to. So, if you're just using the stuff that we provide, you won't need to worry about it at all. All right, so there are some common templates for, things that you'll do on a regular basis. We have 3 of these 4 in the setup guide that you can literally just copy and paste and produce a different kind of team if you want to test other use cases for Claude agents. And then power moves, or like advanced features, you can actually explicitly define ownership rules. And here is a sample command for how you can do that. You can set plan then execute on a per agent basis. You can standardize how the handoffs actually work. This is best done in the rule set. So you can define this explicitly. Say X task is complete. These files are changed. Essentially have it create a summary document to then hand off to the orchestrator or the other agents that they're working with, so that they're all on the same page. Next, we can do permissions pre-approval. So in your settings.json file that we showed in the cursor window, you can set an allow list, so you don't have to manually approve everything. And the more agents you have, the more prompts you would get. So if you allow bypass or approval or whitelisting in the JSON, then you won't have to be constantly monitoring the session and approving everything that it's trying to do. It can save you a lot of time. And then again, the handoff document, we already talked about that a little bit, but having each of the agents summarize what they're doing and any open issues that are remaining can help keep the team on the same page. All right, now very important, teams, as you might see, there is a setup cost, and then many individuals in many specific use cases don't actually need to use teams, right? And so teams is best when you have very clear domain boundaries. The task that you're trying to do is very clear, and the roles that you need to complete that task are also very clear. If it's a very quick, coding task that only requires 2 minutes, it's not going to be the best use case for teams. You typically want a task that's, an hour, 2 hours long, that has multiple different pieces that are able to be worked on in parallel, different modules or components to a more monolithic software application is kind of where agent teams shine. Or if you want to have an additional project that you're working on in addition to what you're working on with Claude Desktop, because Claude Desktop can really only handle one session successfully at a time. But with agent teams and or Claude code in terminal, you can have 20 terminals open on the exact same machine, all doing different coding tasks for you, or 20 different teams set up in each of those terminal sessions, each working on their own software project. So that's how a lot of software development teams that I know of that are scaling with AI are doing it right now. They're senior software developers that used to be the ones coding are now managing multiple teams of agents that are all working on their own projects. And so a little bit highlight of where this is going. These features are being rolled out pretty aggressively by Claude to kind of dominate the business-focused marketplace. And there's a lot of additional automation pieces. We talked about routines. Those can be used to automate, code reviews and content building pipelines and all of that. And eventually we're going to get Claude as its own, standalone operating system that will be able to do everything agentically, and we'll be able to access it via voice and no longer have to sit in front of a computer anymore. And then a quick recap, the full stack. So this actually has Claude on the bottom, or Claude code on the bottom, which is kind of the foundation for all of the rest, going all the way up to agent teams, which is the utilization of teams or agents in parallel, and how all of these pieces kind of work together. And additional resources for you guys. So this QR code and the tiny URL link here gives you access to the homework doc. We're not going to go through the homework doc because we don't have enough time right now. So you guys can go through it on your own. It will have additional commands, additional use cases, and prompts for you to use for agent teams. So if you want to continue building up your skill set with agent teams, definitely go access the homework document and check through everything that's in there. And you can, build up a number of other use cases and different projects and stuff that we've listed. We also put together a DeFi done-for-you pro pack that is a list of, I think it's 50 or 60 different prompt packs for you, where you can just copy and paste all of them for just about any business and personal Claude agent teams use case you can think of. And that link is, I believe, on the last page. And then we have our links. We have the AI Collective link tree. We have the next talk that we're doing on the 23rd, which is in 5 days. I know a lot of you have registered for that one as well. That one will be less hands-on in the terminal. So if you do not like working in the terminal, if you've experienced this today and seen that working in the terminal is a pain, you don't like it, then this one might be more up your alley, because it will be utilization of the Claude desktop app rather than a bunch of terminal sessions. And then we're actually going to be doing custom Openclaw sessions coming soon. We have a Facebook group, which the link is not there right now, but it should be in some of the other links that we have, and definitely on the homework guide. And here are additional links for you to the slides, to the community, and to the pro pack that we just talked about. So I went through those last few slides very quickly, again, in an effort to save time, so that we actually have some QA time here at the end. So now that we're at the end, I'm going to open up the floor to you guys for QA. If you guys have questions, I'll answer questions for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we will cap off the call. The recording will again be posted on many different channels, from our Slack channel to our YouTube channel, and many others that we monitor and maintain. So you should be able to find it in a variety of places. And we will also be sending a follow-up email from Meetup to everyone that registered for this event. So you'll get all of the links that we talked about today, including the published recorded video on YouTube. So if you don't want to go actively search for it, you can go ahead and just get the recording on YouTube later. So again, open it up to you guys now. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in chat. I will answer what I can in the next few minutes, and then we can cap it off. But I appreciate everyone for coming. I know there's going to be a lot of technical issues for setting this up because there's a lot of different machines that can be used and different settings and everything. And it's really difficult to standardize across every single computer type you can use and all of that. But utilizing, again, Claude for troubleshooting should be able to help you. All right, so I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, but they asked, what Slack channel should we post our Claude team questions? So if you have them and you're in Slack, you can either post in the Discuss Technical, which is the global technical discussion. You can post them in our Hampton Roads public channel, which is the public channel for our specific chapter. Or you can just DM me directly and I will do what I can to help you. All right, Nadav asked, he has multiple backend repos with shared packages. Is it possible to create a team of 3 backend teams and sync between them? So you can create a team however large you like and have them sync together. So I personally sync using, Andre Carpathy put out a Wikipedia blueprint essentially a couple weeks ago that I used to sync all of my agents of all types. So I run agents through a variety of frameworks, including the AWS Agentic Framework and Gemini and Claude and Openclaw, and they all sync to the exact same Wikipedia, which is hosted in GitHub. So I would try using that because you can host, the libraries in GitHub along with the Wikipedia, and then have the agents get access to all of those. All right, Barney asked a question. Let me see. Cowork skills. Each is a domain expert. Okay. Does agent teams extend to triggered routing patterns? So I'm not exactly sure what you mean by triggered routing patterns. Are you talking about routing patterns at the prompt and task decomposition layer? Or routing, like inter-team routing to work on specific tasks? And specifically, like, are you asking if they do that natively or if it's something that you can set up? Because they do inter-team routing natively. All right. They asked, nope, there's no question there. She just appreciated it. So thank you for coming, Faye. Thickus, thanks for that. Thanks, Audine. Vision Care Centers of Virginia. Okay, thank you. Nancy, can you explain why we should use Linux Ubuntu rather than running everything in PowerShell? So Claude Code does not run on Windows. If you want to run Claude Code in Windows, you have to do it through the desktop app. It won't run natively in Windows, which is why we install Ubuntu or any other flavor of Linux, or we use Mac OS. And the reason why is they just built Claude Code on a Linux framework. I do hope that they create a, command line or PowerShell native version just to make things a little bit easier so we don't have to jump through many, many different steps. But right now it is for Linux and Mac OS. And I haven't actually checked the Claude development roadmap to see when they're planning to release it for Windows, if they actually are. Nadav, when do you use sub-agents versus team? So sub-agents are typically spawned automatically when you're talking to the composer agent, which is the default agent when you're working with the web interface or Claude Desktop. And when you are setting up an agent team, one of them will get nominated as a team lead, and those will divide the tasks between the team if you haven't specified it. but it won't spawn sub-agents in the same way that Claude for the web or Claude Desktop would. All right, then we have Yevgen, sorry if I mispronounced your name, is agent teams working only on Opus 4.7? So no, it requires Opus, period. You can't use it on Haiku or Sonnet, but you can use it on any version of the Opus model that is publicly available. So if you are using the OAuth connection, like your unlimited connection with Pro or Max, then I think you're limited to 4.6 and 4.7 right now. But if you're using API, you should be able to go back quite a bit further to previous Opus models, but it does require Opus to actually run. All right, Faye asked another question. What's the best resource to learn how to structure or think about task projects and teams? And is that under the umbrella of the Carpathia resource? So the way that I did it, and I recommend a lot of people to do it, is to just have conversations with Claude, specifically set to Opus and either high or max effort. So it's the most intelligent version of the Opus model that you can chat with. And then ask it specifically how you should be thinking about the tasks, projects, and teams that you structure. Right, I structure mine in the way that it makes sense for me and my business workflows and all of the other things that I need to do and how I think. But the way that you interact with this technology will likely be different because you think differently than I do. And so working through in a fluid and dynamic basis with one of these LLMs like Claude can help you set it up in a way that makes sense to you and helps allow this tool and technology to be an extension of you and the work you're trying to do. And it can tie into the Carpathia resource that I referenced, but is not specifically related to it necessarily. All right, Nancy, is there a reason not to use the desktop app? So no, I love the desktop app. It's very functional. I have the desktop app and multiple sessions of Openclaw, or the Openclaw variant that I've made, running right now on multiple different devices that I have here. So I use it on a regular basis. I recommend it all the time. So I believe that you should use the desktop app. Again, utilizing agent teams is, typically the desktop app can only handle one session or one active, workflow at a time. So if you want to be having it run, social media content creation, making a video for you, that kind of stuff, it won't be developing an app for you as well. And so you would spawn a agent team session utilizing the process we talked about today. And then you can have the agent teams coding the app that you need while the Claude desktop manages your local file structure and is creating the video and dumping the files into your downloads folder and all of that. So they are for parallel use cases and they can complement each other, but you don't specifically need to use one or the other. All right, I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, but they asked, how is the token usage limited in Claude Pro for running agent teams? So it's not limited in your ability to use it, but it will count against your total usage and your usage limits. And agent teams will utilize more tokens on average than a single agent for any particular task. The increased usage cost is about 30% to the total number of tokens used. So do keep that in mind if you're on just a pro account, the $20 account, because you can hit your threshold pretty quickly. But if you're creating, a small app, maybe one small app a day, you're not going to hit your usage limits. So it's not something to worry about that much. All right, then we have another question from Zhao. Do you think Teams is the best way to develop software? I normally prompt my questions directly with Claude to get questions to refine the problem, but it seems Claude can automatically split the task into sub-agents. What's the difference between Claude team and sub-agents? So again, I utilize all of them for software development, mainly to get that parallelism in effect. Usually the Claude desktop instances that I run are doing things like social media automation. They are creating, editing videos, creating content pipelines for LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and all of that. And so those tasks are running, which means that I can't use that for developing, though I do use desktop for developing as well. But the terminal session allows you to spawn up as many teams and as many coding sessions as you want. So if you have a lot of very defined use cases for things that you want to develop and create, and you can essentially, batch them, right? You can have a discussion with Claude, as you were talking about, using the web browser version or the desktop version, and say, hey, I want to develop these 5 pieces of software. The output of this conversation should be a prompt that I can paste into Claude agent teams and have each team work on each individual software development task, right? And then the output of that chat will be 5 prompts that you can then copy and paste into your Ubuntu terminal sessions or macOS terminal sessions. And each one will then work on a specific software project for you, right? All right, Barney asked another question. Triggered routing lives at the skill layer in Cowork, and agent teams lives at the execution layer in Claude Code, so they stack but not overlap. Is that the right frame? So I have not looked into where triggered routing actually lives, so I can't comment on that. I would suggest asking Claude to look up the specific Claude help documents, because the documents that they put out for all of these tools are fantastic. And giving the URL to Claude or having Claude find the URL and then having that discussion with them will get you a better answer than I can give you off the cuff right now. So, all right. Vicus, I tried Haiku. I was able to run through this tutorial. Maybe something changed. Maybe it did. So last I knew, and specifically when you're setting it up, it says it has to be, using Opus, but maybe they changed it. I don't know. But I'm glad it worked for you. All right, Thomas. No to path name backslashes. Okay. Linux is greater than Windows. For many use cases, but for individuals that are not power users, there's certainly a lot of trade-offs for utilizing Linux instead of Windows. The same could be said for Mac OS, right? Mac OS is the most, on guardrails out of all of the operating systems. And Windows is, kind of like a mix between Linux and Mac OS. So it really depends on the user experience that you want. But I agree, I use Linux a great deal for a lot of different work. All right, and then the last question or comment by John Hicks, looking into Crew AI. Seems like something one would build with if a workflow is well-defined. Yes. So I've looked at and tested Crew AI before. It was a while ago. It was actually part of the beta, and I thought it was cool. I personally don't use it because if I need an agent on a prolonged basis or a team of agents on a prolonged basis, I build it using one of the frameworks that are available, right? Like the AWS framework. If I want to build something within AWS, there's also a Google and a Microsoft framework that works for Azure and GCP. So, just the kind of developer that I am, I will build my own agentic team, from scratch if needed. So I don't typically use tools like Crew AI, but I have tested many like that, and they're very functional for people that don't want to do the development legwork for themselves. Yeah, so the Carpathia resource, let me Google search it real quick. Andre Carpathia Wiki. All right, so I will post this in chat real quick. All right, so that is the link in chat. It should go to the LLM Wiki GitHub gist page. And literally what I did is I provided this URL to my Claude Code session, and I had it build the wiki and host it in GitHub. And the way that I implemented it is that I have a console that monitors and all of my agents of all different kinds plug into. So all of my Openclaw, all of my Claude agents, all of my AWS agents, all of the agents that I have plug into a same central console. And they utilize the same wiki. There's a download and install package that was created as part of the wiki setup that all of my agents get and take and implement. And so what that package includes is connection to the wiki, connection to the console that I'm talking about, and then specific instructions and triggered hooks that basically say, anytime the Claude agent's having a discussion with you or it completes a project, it will create a condensed summary of what was done and dump that into a file that gets pushed to GitHub, where the wiki is stored in GitHub. And that way, there's no manual inputting of any of the data. Like, my wiki automatically builds itself. And since I put it together about 2 weeks ago, it's already 50,000 pages. So the way that it's been implemented is pretty fantastic. I'm very happy with it. And it saves on average about 70% of my token use. All right, so Barney said triggered routing is a skill and subagent layer, team agents pure orchestration, but the bridge is that subagent definitions can be reused as teammate roles. Yeah, that sounds accurate to me. Again, if that's what Claude told you after reading its own documents, I would totally trust it. I don't have any reason to doubt what it said. Alan, yes. So you can't load the slides. I'm just going to paste the link in chat for you. Alan, there's the link. All right, Ellie, thanks for that. Yeah, Nadav, so you can define who the team lead is in the agent teams, and it will be the orchestrator for the teams and the work that you're doing, yes. All right. I don't think we have any more questions. So again, thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate all of you for showing up and asking a bunch of fantastic questions. Hopefully the use of the terminal didn't shock anyone too much. But yeah, no, I really appreciate it, guys. If you enjoy these sessions, feel free to leave a review on Meetup and sign up for our talk coming up on the 23rd. And then we're also going to be doing more talks on our Openclaw setup and then the Openclaw variant that we've put together starting in 2 to 3 weeks from now. So that will all be coming up very soon as well. If you want to learn about Openclaw and how it differs from Claude Code and Claude Desktop and which one you should be using for what kind of use cases and all of that. So again, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks, Luis, for posting all of the links, and appreciate everyone here. Thanks, guys.